Winged Nation presents, presented by Drydene DRF Racing Oils.
The sprint car world is made up of so many talented individuals and so many talented crew guys and wrench turners, including Guy Forbrook. Guy Forbrook is a member of the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. In his career at Knoxville alone, he has 87 wins and 11 championships. Across the country, 63 different racetracks he's won at, more than 270 wins. Guy Forbrook, an icon, turning the wrenches on race cars at the Jackson Nationals earlier this year. I had the chance to catch up with Guy. With thousands of laps logged, Drydene's DRF racing oils were built and proven on the track, and now they're ready for your race engine. DRF is engineered exclusively for high horsepower racing engines that require maximum performance against the toughest competition. And DRF racing and break-in oils are built with competition-grade ZDDP to protect critical engine components while boasting improved torque and horsepower and superior temperature reduction. To get DRF in your engine, go to drfracing.com or call 1-877-DRYDENE. Now, my visit with Guy Forbrook. We're here talking to 2016 Sprint Car Hall of Famer Guy Forbrook. Hey man, how are you?
Great. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. I want to go back right to the beginning, okay? And we're doing this at Jackson Motorplex, and I was down in the Jackson Racing Hall of Fame temporary building they have there, and your dad's name is all over everything down there. Your dad racing, what's your first recollections, your first memories of your dad racing?
Oh, it would have been in the 60s probably. I didn't really remember Jackson that much. It was probably 69 at Knoxville.
Yep.
First time I really start remembering things, 69, 70. I mean, I can remember in 1970 when Joey's dad, little Joe Saldana, set a new track record at the Knoxville Nationals at 1906, the time was at that time.
Wow.
And he won the Nationals that year. So that's probably my first recollection, really, of kind of the racing stuff.
What kind of a racer was your dad?
He was pretty much like a dry slick IMCA guy like they all were back then, Sunday afternoon kind of racer. That was probably his best forte.
And you ultimately ended up following him to the driver's seat, but were there other things, were you determined to be a race car driver, or were there other things that might have jumped in and kept you from doing that? Or as you were a young kid going through that, what was that like?
No, that's really all I wanted to be. I'd race snowmobiles too.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd always wanted to be a race car driver, and then I went to college, and basically I went to college half-heartedly, basically, because I wanted to race. So I put in my time a little bit there, and then decided to come back, and I met with two retired farmers, and they co-signed a note with me, and I went to the bank and bought a car. And the rest is history. That's how I started driving a race car.
So you borrowed money. Well, I mean, and I guess that was probably a different era because now there's not a lot of ways to make money in racing. But then it was kind of a business. Yep. There was a light at the end of the tunnel where you could. This was a business.
Yeah. No, I always had treated racing as a business. When I raced snowmobiles, I raced them. I didn't go like. I always raced with the big guys.
Yeah.
I always traveled around from Wisconsin to South Dakota to North Dakota. When in 1980 I won the World Series at Waldheim, Canada, up by Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So I raced against. I always like to race against the best people that you can race.
Yeah.
No different with cars. When I started, I always wanted to race against Doug Wolfgang or Steve Kenzer or Sammy Swindell.
The snowmobile in mid-'80s, you got the farmers to co-sign, you got your race car, okay? Did you also snowmobile race at that time, or was there a fork in the road where you went to the car side? What happened there?
No, I came home with the snowmobiles one day and decided that was enough and to sell them. And I really didn't like the cold, if you really wanted to know the truth.
I get that.
And But snowmobiles are fun. We grew up as a family that we had a dealership, snowmobile dealership,
Okay.
with Polaris, and but race cars were always my dream. And as a kid back then, all you wanted to race was the Indy 500. The Daytona 500, you always kind of heard about it at that time, but the Indy 500 was the thing. AJ or the Unsers or all them guys, and that's when little Al was starting and running around here with sprint cars with the Pennzoil team and that. The Indy cars were what everybody wanted to do at that time.
And so that was the career path. That was where you were headed.
That's what I wanted to do. Yep.
You got started in the 360s or ran in the 360s, then up into the 410s, had some success. What kind of racer were you as far as the driver goes?
I was aggressive.
Uh-huh.
Probably a cross between a Hodenshield and a Lasowski. Kind of both. I could run the bottom, I could run the top. I had no problem wheeling you if I had to.
Yeah.
And I could flip with the best of them, So, but no, I was young. I only got a couple of years in, but I had a lot of people doing good things for me, and it was really looking good.
Really looking good, rolling through your life. The car accident, not a race car accident, put you in a stage where you're paralyzed, and you stayed away from racing for a while. Was it just you couldn't do? I probably understand it, but describe why you stayed away from racing at that point.
Well, at that time, after I got hurt, I knew, laying in that road ditch that night, I knew 10 minutes after that accident, when I got out of the car and went over to see my friend and then sat down, and I never got back up. But I knew when I couldn't move that I was in big trouble. And but I also, as I kept progressing, I knew that probably my racing was over. And so, to be honest with you, I held a pretty big chip on my shoulder for quite a while. And then I got to doing some research stuff, some walking with electric stimulation and with some really good people, and it kind of kept my mind focused on other things besides being paralyzed, And then the guy by the name of Ron Coles that I was driving for, like when I first, the last time I drove, he called me actually and wanted me to go to a race with him, and I did, and I really kind of stayed away somewhat with it. And then we kind of sat down and talked about maybe doing something, and I didn't think it was going to be really going to happen. And then he calls me up and says, "Hey, I want you to do this team." So that's how it started. And then that year we hired quite a bit different guys because it was in the middle of the year, and we raced with Jerry Reichert Jr. and Lasowski and Rocky Hodges and TJ Giddings and just names, And we built the motor for the Nationals, me and a couple other friends, at a guy's shop, which the guy at that time was in southern Minnesota here, became Hendricks Motorsports head dyno guy a year later.
Wow.
Right off the farm. So it was a bunch of farm boys building this motor, and we went to the Nationals. I hired a guy at the gate by the name of Rick Unger, never met him in my life, and we ran like 14th or 15th in the AMA of the Knoxville Nationals.
Oh my God.
So honestly, out of all the things that we've done out of this little town, I think that was probably one of the biggest feats, where I took this motor, we built it on this engine stand, put it in the back of my 66 Impala in the trunk, took it to a shop and put the motor in the car, and we barely even had a spare front axle when we went to the Knoxville Nationals, and hired a guy we never even knew and made the AMA.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Were you, back when you were a driver, were you mechanically hands-on? When you were a driver, the mechanical side of it was always of interest to you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I could build my own motors and do my own cars, and I was the same way with the snowmobile. You know, I would do my own thing, do my own stuff. No different than right now, like with the cars. I'm pretty much hands-on with motors, and I'm probably better with motors than I am with setup. But I always could make motors run really good, so the setup was kind of, Where if we were close with the car, we were okay. You know.
Yeah. In talking to some of your drivers, man, you were a magician on those motors. I mean, and was there? Why was that? What?
Two strokes. You grew up in a world of two-stroke snowmobile motors. They're the most finicky things you could ever work on. And you learn fueling, and you learn sounds, and then I got to drive cars, and that's what blew these guys away at first when I started driving cars for other people, how I could get out and tell them the motor's lean, the motor's rich, the motor's vibrating on the top.
Wow.
And I hadn't even raced a year and a half. And that was all from riding snowmobiles.
Wow, that makes sense though, because that's where your everyone your motors, those cars would just go really, really strong.
I mean, I've had some. Anytime that I ever got in trouble back then, I would always talk to these older guys, like way older than me, because I was in my 20s then, barely 20 actually, and I would always talk to like the old drag race guys, or an old airplane guy, or just about things about mechanicals about motors, you know, what makes them tick, and the camshafts and the fuel systems. And then actually after that, then when you start racing and traveling around, if you're going to own your own team and you're going to travel around the United States, you better have your ducks in a row or you're not going to make it go. Because I for 26 years of my own team, I did it for a living. I mean, the car, if it didn't make money, I had to go home. So, and we had a lot of good years, you know, and just kind of learned on the fly with them things. And at that time, when we first started, I was with a guy by the name Earl Gertie. Which that engine shop was top of the line, you know. So with working with Earl too, it was really good.
You guys, one of the things in talking, and it's almost bringing it to the present, but you know, I still want to follow the story here, but how creative could you be with engines at that time?
You know, it's like if you sit here right now, I wish I'd have knew this back then, because man, you would have had a big advantage.
Yeah.
What you've learned through the whole road now, and if you could be doing this back then, and I honestly, I mean, I sit back and think about Carl. Carl was Steve. He had Steve, but Carl had motors that would really run too, and Carl was always ahead with his motor program with a lot of people, and you kind of, it's like you get a couple of years going here and you think, God, why didn't I think about that 5 years ago?
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the stuff though is like monkey see, monkey do, and you're kind of going along and doing things, and people don't like to get out of the box that far because the motors were so expensive. But I mean, when I did my own stuff, I did get out of the box.
Yeah.
You know, and we blew some stuff up too. You know, so
I'm sure. Yeah.
we did. You know.
Yeah. Amazing numbers, 270 wins, 63 different tracks. 87 of those wins were at Knoxville, 11 championships. What was there about that racetrack that just was kind of your sweet spot?
Well, I mean, there's a few things. Like I said, we had good motors, and then we started with Danny, and I'd been there too before, and Danny was good at Knoxville. So at the end of the day, with me working on the motors and a guy that had been there a little bit, and then I drove there, and then we raced around a little bit more, it just kind of fit what we had going on. And as we went along, though, we could win on bull rings no matter if it was Jack or Danny or Johnny or whatever. But Knoxville's always, because we always went home, we always had a base. We always never lost. At the end of the year, I always said, you got to have something to hang your hat on. So to hang our hat on was always to win the Knoxville points at that time. Because at least at the end of the year, you had something. You could win 40 races or 30 races, but if you never won a big one, it was just a race. But if you won the Knoxville points and some big races, you always had something to hang your hat on.
Right, something to and carry you through,
right,
and get you on. You mentioned the Danny, you know, one of the early guys that drove for you, on again, off again, on again, off again. I almost, and not knowing you that well, not knowing Danny that well, it's almost like brothers, it seems like to me. describe Danny as a racer first off. What were the things that made Danny Lasowski so good as a racer?
Patience.
Yeah.
He's not the bravest, but he's got a lot of common sense. He had a lot of patience. He didn't wreck. He was a very good points racer. Could read the tracks. He could feel. And his emotions never got the best of him. He could drive within himself as far as, a lot of guys, if you watch them race, when they get rattled on the track, their emotions kind of get the best of them and they forget where they're going or what they're doing. And it takes a couple laps once they get rattled to kind of get their bearings back. And he was good at that. Steve was probably the best at that I ever
it's just a rock.
Yeah, you could barely rattle him.
Yeah.
So.
When I look at the drivers that you had, Steve, Sammy, Danny, Jack, Terry McCarl, Tim King, Jeff Shepard, Bobby Davis, and
Stevie Smith.
Stevie Smith, yeah, exactly.
Keith Kaufman, Ronnie Schumann.
Oh my gosh.
Rocky Hodges. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but there's a lot of them,
How did the different, because you had everyone from laid back to intense, like a Sammy, to an intense fighter like Terry. How did that work with you, working with those? This is more off track, personality wise. How did that all work for you? And what were the challenges? What were the strong points? How did that work?
Well, most of the time you got a guy like Steve or Sammy or Danny or Jack or Johnny or them guys like that. You just got to do your job because they're going to do theirs, and and just communicate in the pits. So if you do your job, they're going to do their job, and as successful as they are and what they were, you had the best drivers in the country. You just had to do your job, and you would get the job done. That was the biggest thing. There was no secret about if you had a car that wouldn't fall out and wouldn't break and the motor ran, and you put guys like that in the car, you're going to have success. So, and then if you get the car really good and then have them in the car, you're going to have a lot of success, Totally. So, I was lucky enough to have the best guys in the country race for us.
But you had some of the best equipment too.
Yeah, we did. We had good motors and good cars and a lot of good people behind us. But most of it was all local. Like the stuff that I'm doing even right now, it's the old guys that I had in 1989 are back on this car. So, and it's fun, but they also know that if we're going to do this, we're going to win before it's over here, Yeah. And that's if I'll work 24/7 if I have to, so we can win. And sometimes maybe that's my downfall, where I work so much that I work myself in the ground, but I hate to lose. And at the end of the day, if you got good equipment and good drivers, you got no excuses.
Has there ever been a waning in that fire in your belly? Has there ever been a time where it's like, okay, maybe family vacations and retirement and that sort of thing, or is that fire still burn like it did back when you were a race car driver in the early 80s?
No, I've actually been contemplating retiring here just because of how I've been feeling.
Yeah.
But if I get my health back turned around, I want to win as bad as I did in the 80s. I don't want to live in a hotel every other night though anymore. Since I've been 16 years old, I've lived in a hotel, from snowmobiles to cars, and I've seen every hotel from New York to Florida to Washington to California you can see.
Yeah.
And nice ones and bad ones. So I just want to win big races, have a really good small team, and be successful.
Yeah.
That's what I would still like to do. And if I can get my health turned back around where I feel like I want to do it every day, hell yeah, I'll do it another 20 years if I can,
Wow, that's it. When you look at your career, all the wins and everything, is there one win, one situation, one memory that kind of stands out to you that says, okay, if we're making a highlight reel of Guy Forbrook's career, this is the number one highlight? What would that be?
Well, in a car, it's hard to pick with the car because I had so many good guys, so many good crew guys, so many good drivers. It's hard to say, well, I'm going to pick this guy out and say this was the race. I mean, but you got to probably say like the first Outlaw win would be big on your, because we never even dreamt at that time that we were going to go out in the first year and win an Outlaw show.
Yeah.
And we did. And so that would be one of your highlights. Cheaters Day races that they had right down the road here at Sioux Falls in that big track where there was anything goes. We won a lot of them, and probably the biggest one there was with Jack, with a car that we had built. And these guys, we'd won it the last couple of years before that with Danny, and Danny showed up with Kenny Woodruff, and they pretty much kind of copied what we had been doing. And Wolfgang showed up with Max Rogers, and he kind of been doing some things, and we opened the back door of this thing, and we had Jack driving it, and I rolled this thing out, and they all looked at it like, what in the hell? And I had leg stand from the rear bumper to the front bumper, all the way down the side, and then I had IndyCar side pods on it, and so I had adjustable worker bills on it, but this wing went all the way down the side, and I had put a brake on it so I would grab air and all that, and we braced it in the back, and we went out and we hot lapped it. And in this place here, it was fast. This is as big as like, no, it's bigger than Knoxville.
Yeah.
So, and it's an afternoon race. So Jack gets in the car, and you guys got to know Jack. He hot laps this thing, and this place has got a crosswind on it, and it's the middle of the afternoon. And he gets out of the car and he goes, Forbrook, this thing's a little scary to drive.
For Jack.
Now, if you can imagine Jack Hodenshield saying that, I said, what? He goes, I'm telling you, when it gets that side wind, it just takes you for a ride. I said, all right, we'll just kind of watch to see what the wind does here. And so they ran these different classes and all that, and Wolfgang and Lasowski started on the front row, and we started second row. And they dropped the green, and Wolfgang's leading, and Lasowski's running second, and they get about 8 to 10 laps in it, and they come off of 4, they go down the front straightaway, and I'm on the back straightaway in turn 3, and they go out of sight. And there's like 8 to 10,000 people in these stands. I mean, it's huge, one of them big fairground stands. All of a sudden, the whole crowd just goes crazy. And I'm standing on the back straightaway, or sitting back there with a guy by the name of Al Cole, the guy who did the motors with us, that bought them. And the whole crowd goes crazy, and Hod comes off of turn 2, leading this race, and he had passed 5 cars when he went out of sight. And Al looks at me, he goes, what in the hell did he do, drive through the infield? And I said, I got no idea. And I got the video of this thing. He drove in on the outside, obviously Lasowski, because he was on the bottom.
Yeah.
He passed Lasowski on the outside. He turned left and went back under Wolfgang and passed him on the inside. And there was 2 lap cars or 3 lap cars in front of them. And he took another right and went back to the outside and passed the 3 lap cars and come off of turn 2. He's leading this race. And he gets out of the car and he goes, Forbrook, I don't know what an Indy car feels like to drive, but holy shit, this is what's got to be what it's like.
God.
That's what he said to me, because he was just going like this and driving around. So then there was like 5 laps to go. There was a red flag. Somebody had crashed, and Wolfgang's tires, he was trying to keep up with us with this, and he run his tires off. So back then you could change tires on the red. So he decides to change tires, and I looked at Hod and I said, now listen, you run this thing hard for 1 lap and then get off the throttle, because they said you're going through the corner so fast you're just running the tires right off of this thing. So he runs her 1 lap, and he gets about a straightaway out there in 1 lap, and he ends up winning the race. We pull up in the front straightaway. He gets out of the car. By the time he gets around to the front of the car, both the tires went down on the rim.
Oh,
They're
my
both
God.
Flat. Both went flat. So
For a guy like you, and I've actually we've done a lot of work with the Weichert family, Todd Weichert and talked to Davey Brown and Bob Weichert. Love the big motors, love the big thing. For a guy like you, those cheater races must have just been lick your chop days.
Well, I mean, it was just actually it was fun, because you had to be inventive and you had to be open, and bottom line is you just wanted to win.
Yeah.
And you to over engineer somebody else's deal, and most of the time you can kind of tell, because it didn't cost that much to do this stuff, to make it. And when we built these IndyCar side pods, this is a funny story too. I was in Manzanita at the Pacific Coast Nationals non-wing race with Jack, okay? It was 118 in the shade. It was in October. And we met this old fabricator from there.
Yeah.
And I said that I wanted to build these pods. And he said, well, come down about midnight to my shop. It was down on Van Buren, okay?
Yeah.
Which I don't know if any of you guys know anything about where everyone goes. Well, I mean, at midnight, you try driving around down in there, you're like in this, like Fort Knox, when we got to this old building, all these gates and locks and everything, you know. We went in there from midnight to 2 in the morning to build these IndyCar side pods on these Nerf bars, and he did the adjustable worker bills and all that. And we were running non-wing though that week with Jack.
Yeah.
So we go to this non-wing race, and Schumann had drove for me that year in '91 because Jack had got sick. And Schumann and Leland come walking up to me, and Schumann goes to me, he goes, now Forbrook, because Schumann couldn't believe the motors, okay?
Yeah.
He goes, we're taking the wing off tonight, that motor ain't gonna do you a bit of good.
Okay.
I said, okay, because I'd never raced a non-wing car.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And so I asked them guys kind of what kind of gears they were running, and we come back to the pit there, and I mean, actually, this is a pretty funny story. And I said to Hot, I said, all right, now listen, I don't want to hurt you. So I got no clue what the hell I'm doing here, so you just work with me until we get this thing going. So we go out the first time trials, and it's a new track record right out of the box.
Oh, dear God.
and we end up winning the race that night. And Leland and Schumann start on the front row of this race. And we start 6th. And they dropped the green, and it looked like Jack was on the interstate, and these guys were driving as fast as they could, and he was just going in and out, and they come off of 2 at Manzanita, Schumann on the bottom, Leland on the top, and Hod come off of 2 and passed him right down the middle and just drove right on by.
Oh my God.
So Schumann comes over to me after the race. He goes, you know what, Forbrook, I've raced a lot of non-wing races in my life. I have never seen nothing like that. That's the most ill-handling piece of junk I've ever seen. He goes, that's what he said to me. I said, yeah, I still got a motor though.
The most ill-handling
He was watching Jack drive this thing around there, you know. And so we're loading up because you had to unload in Manzanita, and we're loading up, and this old guy in these bib overhauls comes walking over to me, and he goes, do you really run a 30 right rear on that car tonight? And I looked at him, I said, I don't know why. He said, I was just wondering. He said, it doesn't really matter, I was just wondering, because they're all running 40s, and I kind of worked with the Goodyear guys and all that, and he kind of kept pushing me, and I said to him, yeah, I did. He said, okay. So the next night we come back to the track, and we start on the front row of this race, and about 10 laps into it, we blow a shock from a rock going through it, and he's leading it. And we get passed by this guy that won the race. So this old guy comes walking over to me after the races the next night, and he goes, God, thanks. And I said, thanks for what? And he goes, for giving me that tip about that 30. And I said, who in the hell are you? He goes, well, I'm Bubby Jones. I said,
oh my God.
I said, you son of a bitch. I said,
Yeah.
He retired that night.
Really?
That was the last race he won.
Last race he won.
Yep.
With the 30 on it. Yeah.
And he'll never let me live this down to the day.
Yeah.
Every time he sees me, he goes, you still running that 30? You know? And that's how I met Bubby Jones.
Oh my gosh.
1991.
That's phenomenal. You've had the characters, the personalities, the people, that had to be as much entertainment. I mean, I know you want to go out there and whoop everyone's ass. I get that. But my God, the stories, these situations like that just had to be so much fun back traveling that time.
If I ever get in trouble, like with cars or doing things right now, I'll either call a guy like Bubby Jones, Rick Ferkel,
Yep.
Davey Brown. I'll call guys like that because those guys, they done it, and they had to build it and engineer it and know it. And if I got questions, I mean, you can talk to them guys, and they'll tell you why they did what they did.
Yeah.
And from motor angles to radius rod heights to wings to whatever, these guys they've evolved to what we have nowadays. You know, what they did. You know, and they all were very successful at what they did.
Speaking of nowadays, speaking of where we're at now, we talk about cheater days. We talk about the creativity you used to be able to have. For whatever reason, we're here where we've got the same wings, the same tires, the same this, the same that. As a guy that loves to create, loves to challenge things, Is it feel like you're in a box, or are there still areas that you feel like you can still work in?
No, there's still plenty of things you can work in, and the motor angle, or you can still do motor stuff. I mean, with wings and that, if you definitely could get some advantages in some of these places with different wings, but the cost that it would take for a smaller team to keep up, to carry a wing for a different track to a different track to all that, I mean, when you start talking thousands of dollars for wings and moving around, I mean, then the bigger teams would have an advantage. So I don't have a problem with the wing thing. I wish we still had Goodyear, and not that I'm bad-mouthing Hoosier, but I wish we had Goodyear and McCurry and all those guys in the box yet for one reason: human error. That way you had the choice of what you could screw up on or not screw up on that night for tires. And trust me, that come into play with guys that ran McCurry's and guys that ran Goodyears and guys that ran Hoosiers. One night the guy with the Hoosier would have an advantage, one night the Goodyear would have an advantage, one night McCurry would have an advantage, but you'd still have human error of having your choice of what to pick. So that was another choice where it would make it different and more competitive, I thought,
Yeah. Sometimes I was actually talking about different things like that, and I think it was Terry McCarl, we were talking earlier today. You could outthink the other people, or you could outthink yourself, but that's part of the racing.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's kind of like NASCAR, from the Superbirds to the Thunderbirds to the Monte Carlos to, I mean, that was what, to me, that's what brought NASCAR racing to what it was. The old people, the gearheads, actually hooked to their brand. Nowadays, the younger kids don't have a brand that they're into.
It's a different world,
Right. Back then, there was a Ford guy, there was a Chevy guy, and a Dodge guy, and they lived and died.
You bled that.
Yeah. And to watch, first time I was at Daytona, watch Elliott win that Daytona 500 with that Thunderbird that was 5 inches narrower and cut through the wind better, or you watch the Superbird with Petty, or then you Earnhardt with the Monte Carlo. I mean, that was where people could hook together with that, and that's what sold cars on Monday, actually.
They could identify with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And the team could, teams would run different models of cars at different racetracks back in the day in NASCAR, and bring it back to sprint cars. If there was an option on that with the tires, you could do that deal. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, with sprint car racing, it's gotten the cars really. I mean, when I told you about these two old farmers that I've got this money from and did this, it was $10,000 that I borrowed, from the bank.
Yeah. And
you can buy cars all day long yet for $10,000. So that hasn't really changed from 1983 to now.
Yeah.
That was 4 tires, no motor, the wings, and little odds and ends. It was $10,000 back then, and you can still do it today and race competitive. The biggest thing that's changed is you'd have 15,000 in a motor back then at the most, and now you're in the 60s.
Yeah.
360s are 55,000. I mean, that's why, like this 305 class, I really like this class because, that one motor that I ran here with Brady, we had $7,500 in that motor,
Wow.
And it's a good starting class, and it learns you the basics about cars, and we've had this talk with Knoxville, with John McCoy, and me and him went round and round about this. I asked him, I said, what are you teaching these guys when you put an electronic motor in this car? And then you think you're going to take them from that electronic motor to a 360 or a 410, which is mechanical. Basically the electronic thing, all they got to do is change the oil, and they never even have to work on anything. So what are we teaching them? And then all they want to do is, well, what do we do? How do we do this or that? And you're not really learning anything. And when we were 15 years old, we drove a car to the shop, pulled the motor out to racing on the street. That's the difference in today's world.
Yeah, but it's a societal thing too. We're not a car culture anymore, which is a challenge.
It's just which is sad.
Yeah.
Because but I don't even know if it's a car culture. Nobody identifies with anything anymore. It's
true.
whatever the best deal is on the internet that day is what they identify with.
That's true.
And I'm still a Chevy man, and I'm 50 years old. So I know that kids nowadays don't care really if it's a Chevy, Ford, or a Dodge.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating stuff. It really is how society has changed. Final question for you. 2017 inductee into the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. Actually, it's ironic that we're here at Jackson because I think we were racing here that weekend. Now looking back a couple of years, what did that mean? What does that mean to you to be enshrined there?
Well, I mean, it's an honor to be in that Hall of Fame because then you're in there with people that are definitely built this sport, you know, and I guess it shows kind of what you've done over your career, and people awarded you for doing that, and I'm definitely like to hang my hat on that place. Knoxville is home. Jackson is where I kind of grew up at because I live 50 miles from here, but I grew up kind of at Knoxville, and then to be in the Hall of Fame, the National Hall of Fame there, is a big honor. I just got inducted in this Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so
pretty neat.
But the National Hall of Fame is something that all your hard work paid off.
Yeah. Fred Raymer shared with me that he didn't think it was that big of a deal until he got there. And now looking back on it, it's a huge deal. Were you kind of one of those that was kind of in that category too?
Yeah, me and Fred actually talked about it. I mean, he goes, you know what, Guy, they tell me I won all these races around Pennsylvania and winning this, that. And he said, I still got the same couch in my living room and the same TV. I think I'm still driving the same car. He goes, so I really don't know what I did. Yeah. And I said, and I agree, but I think along the way, I mean, you met a lot of people, and I've made a lot of good friends through this whole United States, and people that you'll never forget, and people that we've already lost, you know. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that the people you meet. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, there's really not even if we'd win the Knoxville Nationals before I'd quit, I mean, it's definitely going to be a big thing in my life.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
But will it be the deal where I would trade any of these other races for it? No, I wouldn't.
What a ride.
Because at the end of the day, the guys work just as hard tonight as they would that night. Yeah. So
just things work out on that magical night in August, and it's but the effort is still there.
And that magical night is eluded me for a long time. We ran seconds, thirds, fourths, and we've won every race there, from outlaw races to ethanol classics to the front to the back to the twin features. That one race.
Yeah. Well, we hope you get your health rolling in the right direction. So you said you want to stay close to home. You want to win some big races, and boy, that'd be nice. So we wish you the best getting your health back together. We appreciate you spending some time hanging out and sharing some stories with us.
Thank you.
How about it? The great Guy Forbrook joining us here on Wing Nation. Guy Forbrook is one of those fascinating guys, and I just love his passion and the fact that he wants to get back racing again as soon as possible. With thousands of laps logged, Drydene's DRF racing oils were built and proven on the track, and now they're ready for your race engine. DRF is engineered exclusively for high horsepower racing engines that require maximum performance against the toughest competition. And DRF racing and break-in oils are built with competition-grade ZDDP to protect critical engine components while boasting improved torque and horsepower and superior temperature reduction. To get DRF in your engine, go to drfracing.com or call 1-877-DRYDENE.
Winged Nation presents, presented by Drydene DRF Racing Oils.